Hi everyone, it's Tom Butt from the Calder Group here again. Thank you for joining in on another video. We're at the point here in the UK where lockdown is now moving gradually to us being allowed to be adults, grown up, and actually get back to life. So I wanted to concentrate now on what the next steps need to be, not just from a financial planning point of view, from a practical business point of view. So I'm pleased to say I'm joined this morning by the owner of Evergreen HR Limited, the wonderful Sue Green. Good morning, Sue.
Good morning, Tom, and good morning, everyone.
You're managing to keep well, keep busy, and with all the constant changes and fun and games of lockdown?
Absolutely. It appears to be busier than ever, to be quite honest with you, Tom, because a lot of clients are making contact with me to ask for advice during this very difficult time around what to do with their employees. So, yeah.
We seem to be in both in industries where the need for advice and need for support is probably bigger than ever. And so, I mean, really a case of just getting straight into the conversation. We're at the point now where the government have allowed businesses to go back to work. I'm doing my business plan now for June to get people back in the office to try and return to, and I hate this phrase, the new normality. What should business owners start to be thinking about, say?
Well, I think there's a key things to think about. I know that a lot of my clients have been putting their employees onto furlough, and certainly it's an opportunity for them to think about what the future business needs are in terms of managing their staff. Employers that haven't traditionally thought about home working for employees are now thinking in terms of, well, actually, part of our operating model, is it more efficient and effective for them to have more staff working from home? And that in itself has implications that they need to think about. Equally, some employers need to think about, well, you know, we might have a more flexible workforce, but also if we're thinking about changing our business plan in light of the current situation, what type of employees do we need? Are we going to introduce new technologies, new working patterns, employees with different levels of skill sets? Do they need more employees, less employees? So all of these things can actually dictate to them what their people plan needs to look like in terms of how they attract and retain future people in their organisation.
Yeah, I suppose one of the things, I think the Chancellor of the Exchequer said it last week, there's not going to be an immediate bounce back. There's obviously, as far as business, as far as just retail and business to business, there is almost, I suppose, that lack of confidence now. So are you able to keep certain employees on furlough and bring others back? What's the rule or what's the advice you would give on how best to ease people back into working when they've had a couple of months of well, freedom?
I know that recently the furlough offering by the government has been extended until the end of October. So from an employer's perspective, it does give them more flexibility to manage their cash flow. If they do find themselves in a position where they are able to bring people back into work, I think that they need to do it in a very measured and fair and reasonable way. So think very coming back into the workplace first. Don't let it be dictated by hours that people work, i.e. selecting part-time workers or not, as the case may be, instead of full-time workers, because what you do run the risk of as an employer is indirectly discriminating. So be very mindful that in any process of selection for returners from furlough, that you do make sure that you are basing it very much keenly on the needs of the business.
So a case of looking at the role that is most important to bring back, whether that's a part-timer, whether it's a full-timer. And I suppose as well, part of that, we're going through, one of our members of staff has children who should be starting education on the 1st of June. Whole different story, not getting into that. But again, we're having to look very closely at her ability to have childcare, because her husband's working, she's obviously, we want her back working. I take it these are the things you need to be discussing with the staff and getting an idea of who can do what and where.
Absolutely, and the key with all of these things is communication. So even when your employees are on furlough, it's really important, I think also from a mental health and well-being perspective, that you are regularly discussing with your employees what the current situation is with the business, how you impact on the business, number of sales, number of clients, whether that's going to increase, reduce the impact on the workforce, and also to help set the wheels in motion for the employee to start thinking about how they can put in place their own personal measures to be able to match the business requirements.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm very fortunate. I've actually got staff who are begging to come back, and part of the reason we could stay, yeah, I must admit, we obviously managed to recruit the perfect people. So thank you very much to my staff before I say anything else. But part of that, part of that is I'm very much aware that one of them has struggled more away from the office than others. So again, is that something you should be taking? Well, how responsible is the employer for thinking that way about their employees?
And you know, I've been having conversations with clients around this very topic, and you know, if they have, sometimes they'll have a team meeting on Zoom, and let's not forget, we've got the Ben, we've got Hangout, we've got various other technologies that we can use to make sure that we are keeping engaged with our workforce. You know, you might have a regular weekly team meeting with your staff anyway. Why not do it via Zoom? Just because people are working from home shouldn't make any difference in terms of being able to do that.
And I suppose this is where it's a case of looking at cash flow, looking at what you need to do. And I certainly know I've spoken to a few people who run their own business who are asking that question about, do we need an office anymore? Because my staff are working perfectly well. We've kept things going from home. I mean, we've been fortunate. We've had technology that we've been able to get our staff to continue providing the same level of service to our clients, from phone calls, emails. As you say, we use Zoom, we use Skype, we use a variety. I suppose it's a case of there may be some additional costs on bringing staff back, because in our office we're trying to make sure everyone's 2 meters apart. There's the lovely perspex glass that we're supposed to have in places, and rules such as only one person in the kitchen at a time, one person in the bathroom. You only get your own drinks. You don't provide drinks for everyone else. Is that an overkill, or is that pretty much a case of you need to think that way because as an employer, again, you're liable for your clients' health and safety at work?
Absolutely. From a health and safety perspective, all employers have a duty of care to provide a safe environment for their employees. And a key element around this, certainly in the situation we see ourselves in, is that they are following the government guidelines, which are exactly as you've just quoted, Tom, making sure that there's a healthy distance of at least 2 meters between workspaces for employees, having maybe a rota system for lunch breaks so that you limit the amount of time that people are in the same area together and limit the numbers. I think it's important that employers think about having a workspace risk assessment conducted so that, you know, that they get in that professional opinion around how to make sure that they are creating that safe working environment for their employees.
And I suppose this is where, when you look at the finance that's available through the Corona interruption loan for the bigger companies, the bounce back loan for those smaller companies, even the self-employed, they've got the bounce back loan up to 25% of turnover, up to £50,000 based on their tax returns. I suppose this is where that money really ought to be spent in terms of preparing the office and helping with cash flow over the next 3 to 6 months as we all get used to what's going on.
Absolutely. And I appreciate that ultimately cash is king, but so equally is employee safety in the workplace.
Yeah, it's getting that balance right, and really the bounce back loans and the interruption loans is something I just wanted to touch upon, because in terms of the planning for business owners, there are things like the workplace pension. I know through furlough they're supposed to be maintaining those payments as long as the amounts met the minimum criteria. But with the bounce back loan, when I've looked at small print, and certainly I've looked at, I think, Barclays, Santander and HSBC off the top of my head, the guarantee is to the government, so there's still a need for business owners to look and go, right, as a risk assessment to the business, what have we got in place that actually the banks can still come after us if we don't make payments in 12 months' time? So as well as covering expenditure on the office, I mean, how would you feel if your clients were saying, we're using the bounce back loan to pay our staff for the next 10 months? Is that something you would advocate, again, depending on the business plan, or is it something you still say, bounce back loan's great, but be very, very careful?
I think that ultimately, I like to operate a very ethical, values-based business. So from my perspective, I would be encouraging clients to think seriously around affordability and not to 100% rely on the bounce back loan. So, you know, if there's an opportunity to really revisit their people plan, the number of staff that they have, and utilise the opportunity to make sure that you're maximising expenditure on your staffing, then I'd say think about that before you 100% put all reliance on the bounce back loan. So, you know, is there an opportunity to change working patterns? Do you need to think about redundancies? Do you have the flexibility within your contracts of employment to think about in the longer term, short time working, layoff clauses? You know, maybe we need to revisit your contracts of employment to think about how we can enable more flexibility in your workforce.
Okay, yeah, I'll go over the point that, yeah, well, as you say, people shouldn't be relying on the bounce back loan. I've heard stories on LinkedIn of people going, well, that's it, that's my wages for the next 12 months, I don't need to draw from the business, which is a little bit frightening, where we don't know where the business is going, we don't know what's going to happen. So for me, I would add to that, look at protecting the directors. What happens if things don't come back as quickly as they can? What happens if, I mean, we're seeing record amounts of deaths, obviously well above the average. We know they're coming down, but we don't know where they're going to go. So it's not just on a director passing away, it's a director becoming ill. So if it's a critical illness, we don't quite know what the impact of coronavirus is to health going forwards. And also for me, I suppose it's looking at those key members of staff, you know, that sales guy, that technical expert, that if they were off for a long period of time, if they passed away, or let's face it, if they got stolen by a competitor, how do you replace that in the business? So I think it's well worth looking, as well as the employment contracts, which absolutely need to be reviewed. I think there's also an argument for looking at how are you protecting the business, because the last thing you want is the bank knocking at the door going, well, the government's protecting us 100%, we'll get our money back, but we've got to chase you first. Oh, and that puts extra pressure and takes you away, particularly if you've lost a key member of staff or a key decision maker.
Yep.
So one thing you mentioned early on that I just wanted to go back to, this really it's looking, I suppose, at the markets and how you approach the market. Because one of the key things for me is obviously now everything seems to be digital. We've had the news today to say that retail sales are down about 50% on clothing, but actually retail sales are now up to almost a third are done online, and I can vouch for that. The amount of Amazon boxes I've had to recycle and put in bins over the last 2 months has been quite frightening. I suppose I suppose there's an argument for there must be now different markets, different approaches. So what's out there? What can people go, I've got the staff, I want to keep them on, they're brilliant workers, but perhaps they need more skills on the digital side. Is there still routes and is there still funding from the government to go down that if we avoid all the coronavirus bounce backy finance available?
Absolutely, there is a lot of opportunity and resources out there for business owners. Obviously, you've got the apprenticeship levy, which organisations of certain sizes will be able to benefit from, but also there's a lot of organisations who are offering free resources to help with developing staff. I think the main thing for employers to think about is what skill set do you need? What do you specifically need to focus on to develop your employees' knowledge? So, you know, if you're thinking about branching into a new sector, do your sales team need more skills in that and training in that particular sector? Could you introduce other interventions where you could link in with various networks within that particular sector where they could give and receive knowledge? So there's various opportunities to develop employees which don't necessarily involve a formalised training course.
Okay, so yeah, it's what, reaching out to someone like yourself to talk about what's needed, what's available, because let's face it, it's going to be easier and more cost effective to maintain the staff we have than start going chasing new staff who have got to learn the company culture. You've got to learn about them, and it may not work. We've all had horror stories where we've employed the perfect person and 2 months later wondered who came to interview and who came to work, because they seem to be completely different individuals.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, the clients that I'm working with are very much thinking about training and development. At the moment, I'm doing a number of online courses around performance management, absence management, to help get managers confident and skilled up around those areas in anticipation of when the furlough ends.
The topic I want to go through at the moment now, Sue, is that dreaded word of redundancy. Because let's face it, a lot of businesses are not going to be coming out of this in one piece. Myself, when we first went into this, I did, I think, 2 disaster plans of, right, if things happen, what are my options, what are going forward? And so far, happily say, and again, if my staff are listening, everything's fine, we're carrying on as normal, not a problem. But redundancy, I suppose for some companies, there may be a tendency to rush, going, we have a cash flow problem, I can only see us getting through the next 2 or 3 months. Right, that's it, we'll start scrapping, we'll start getting rid of members of staff. And I presume you're going to say, pause, breathe. What's the best way of starting that process?
Firstly, I would say don't panic. And I know it is a very difficult situation, but the reality is, you know, all being well, we are coming out of this situation. I think the important thing is to kind of pause and reflect. Think about the impact that this has had on your business. Think about short term, medium term, long term, where you see the business going. Think very carefully in terms of, if you're in the unfortunate position, I appreciate that this may impact on a number of businesses where you do have to make redundancies. Think very, very carefully in terms of the skill set that you need in your organisation, and also the type of people that you want to employ, because it's not just about the tasks and the skill set and the knowledge that they have. It's also making sure that they've got the right behaviours that represent your business and your brand. When you're clear about that, think in terms of how many staff do you need in that area in the next 3, 6, 12 months. Then think about, yes, you may need to make redundancies. Put a very deliberate plan in place around how you're going to communicate with your staff. If you need to make reductions rather than making everyone redundant, put in place a very robust and fair, transparent selection process to enable you to determine who's successful and who's not. Clearly communicate with the staff, give them the opportunity to ask questions, to give you ideas as to how redundancy can be avoided. All of this is couched in the terms of being a meaningful consultation process. If we go legalistic, it's an important requirement that you need to adhere to, irrespective of how long somebody's worked within your organisation. And just be fair and reasonable with everyone.
Yeah, I suppose the temptation is to go, we're running out of cash, must act quickly, and actually that's where things can go wrong if your staff have seen you through so far, against having that respect to help them through by discussing cutting hours. I presume we can still use this, I think you mentioned the furlough carries on until October, so again it's that selection of, rather than jumping in with both feet, go right, as long as you're clear with your employees that, like, we're in financial issues, we don't know where the market is going to go, we'll keep you on furlough as long as possible, but begin the consultation and discussion process. Would that be a sort of a fair approach to it?
Absolutely, yeah. Just be very upfront, be honest with your staff, explain to them the situation and why you're considering redundancy. Because if you start a consultation process, it needs to be about, this is the proposal. You're not saying this is a done deal, because if you do, straight away you're putting yourselves in a compromising position as an organisation. So there are various steps that you have to follow in terms of a redundancy process, and that's why I think it's important to speak to a HR professional like myself so that you don't come unstuck.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of small companies don't have the budget or the facility for HR. We use Sue on HR Pulse. Hopefully, I've got that right. Which is a great online facility that gives us all the structure we need as a small business to get through. I suppose there's also the temptation that if you've got a member of staff that you've just been trying to find a reason to get rid of for whatever, again, if you're going to try and use this as an excuse to get rid of that member of staff that does the job but just perhaps doesn't quite fit in, or just irritates the boss, let's be honest, again, don't jump in, don't be tempted, because that's leaving you with a whole host of legal issues going forward.
Absolutely. Don't use it as an opportunity to performance manage someone else. That's rule number one.
I'll put that at the top of the board again. So I'm aware of that. And again, from a financial planning point of view, there's almost a few things that you may be tempted to do to try and ease the financial burden on the business. Just a reminder, workplace pensions, it's illegal to coerce and encourage members of that pension scheme to opt out. It may save you a couple of £100 or a couple of £1,000, depending on the size of the business and you're paid. But again, from a business point of view, that's a big no-no. And all you need is one unhappy employee at a later date, and you've got whistleblowers left, right, and centre. There are big fines if you get caught. And again, coming back down to things like, if you've got protection plans in place for directors, for loans, keep them going, because we are in that horrible health risk issue where we don't know quite where we're going to go next. And yeah, we just don't know what's there. And of course, things like that, things like death and service benefits, a good pension scheme, health insurance actually might be a great way of encouraging new quality members of staff into the business. at a point when you need them. And I presume we can still do things like covering nursery fees through salary sacrifice and so on. Is that worth exploring rather than automatically cutting hours and sacking people?
Absolutely. So I think if there's any opportunities to generate cost savings, whether it's operational in terms of, changing the way in which your team operates, working patterns, considering encouraging staff to work from home to reduce overheads, thinking about capital expenditure, can you make reductions in terms of rental agreements? Ultimately, speaking to a lot of my clients, they are exploring these opportunities to make cost savings, and recognizing that we're all in this together. So ordinarily, some business owners are being a little bit more flexible with their suppliers and with their clients than they may ordinarily be, in recognition of the challenges that we are facing. So it's always worth asking the question.
Absolutely, and as you talked there, I was thinking research and development. If your business does that, you can claim that back off the government. You can claim money back. Obviously, looking at your VAT position, I know you've still got to put them through, but if you're now in a position where your VAT costs far exceed your VAT income, there's money that will come back off the VAT man. So there's various things like that. So again, it's also looking at involving your accountant and how they can come in. And from a financial advice point of view, certain pensions allow you to use money within the pension scheme. Please don't do it without advice. I mentioned that straight away. Please don't rush to do it, but it's an option for the right people, the right place. Again, don't forget, if you're putting money into your business and things don't pick up, you're putting everything at risk. But yeah, really a case of, again, having that conversation with a professional, picking up the phone and see what your options are.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think we've covered everything we wanted to sort of look at the moment. So for me, the key things are, first of all, don't panic. I do feel like we've stolen that from somewhere. I'm not quite sure, but I'm sure it's out there in the galaxy. We'll find a hitchhiker who can help us pin that one down. So don't panic. Think about your 3-month goal, your 6-month goal, and your 12-month goal, and then the longer business goal. Use the bounce back and the intervention loan sensibly. Really think, rather than taking the maximum because it's there, think about what you need. And when it comes to staffing, it's almost the case of, I want to sum it up as, be inventive and be flexible about how you use your staff going forward. Is that, I'm not crossing any boundaries there by putting it in that way, I take it?
No, I totally agree with you.
Okay, and the main thing is there's plenty of advice out there. So I know, you've been invaluable to us in terms of getting our HR sorted and getting it up and running. I'm not coming to you for any redundancy notices yet, but we'll see next 12 months or so. Warning to the staff, keep working. But it's looking at those, and if you're a small company, your HR service, I'll do a straight plug here, by the way, I'm not getting any commission. I haven't discussed that as yet, but it is nice and simple. We've been doing holidays and rotas for bringing people back this morning on it. Very simple. So again, there's cost-effective solutions like that out there. I take it people can contact you if we put your contact details at the bottom and see how you can help.
Absolutely, and I'm more than happy to offer a socially distanced online demonstration of the software as well.
I think we did that well before social distancing came in. Not quite sure if that means there's something about me or you, but we were ahead of the game. We were long in advance of all this, so which is a nice position to be in. So obviously, lots of things going on. If you do need help, the contact details for myself and for Sue at the end of the videos. So thank you very much for taking time out of a busy schedule to have a quick chat with us this morning.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity, Tom. And as Tom mentioned, if anyone has any requirements or questions relating to financial advice, Tom is your man, and my name is Sue Green, Evergreen HR, so please get in touch.
Yeah, we'll make sure that all the contact details are available, and we'll put this on our YouTube channel, usual social media, so it'll be available for anyone who needs some assistance. But Sue, thank you very, very much. Stay safe, look after yourself, and I'm sure I'll be using you soon as the business grows and we need to take on more staff and more premises.
A pleasure. Thank you, Tom.
All right, take care, Sue. Thank you very much for everyone who's watched, and yeah, stay safe, everyone.